And turning to political matters today, because opposition party leaders will be meeting later to discuss ways to avoid the UK leaving the EU without a deal on the 31st of October.
Now, as we all know, the meeting follows Boris Johnson's comments yesterday that it's, quote, the job of everybody in Parliament, close quote, to deliver Brexit.
Well, Labour's Shadow Brexit Secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, joins us now. Good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning,
we've got this summit being organised today, but it's not looking good, isn't it? It hasn't quite got the support that you'd be hoping for.
I think it is looking quite good. I mean, the question is whether there's a majority to stop this reckless no-deal approach that Johnson's set upon. Obviously, that means bringing opposition parties together. That's what we're doing this morning. There's been a lot of discussion over the summer about how this would work. So I think Jeremy Corbyn convening this, bringing people together is the right thing to do. So that's what we hope to achieve today. I actually do think, I mean, I've only been in Parliament just over 4 years, but there does seem this summer to be a real pulling together of everybody in Parliament who is against a no-deal Brexit. And obviously, there's no mandate for that.
You haven't got the rebel Tories coming today, though, that you need to this meeting. You haven't got Jo Swinson on board. She's not offering her support to Jeremy Corbyn. So if you all can't agree on this, though, how are you going to be able to come together to make this work?
Well, that's the challenge. You're absolutely right. That's the challenge. That's why we're having the meeting. Jo is coming this morning. You've seen some of the government's own documents about what no deal really means. Even the government's assessment in August is that it would, in fact, mean a return of a hard border in Northern Ireland. Oil refineries would be closed down, jobs would be lost, and the ports would be in chaos. Now, if we thought that was happening because of some natural reason, you'd be saying to me, of course, Parliament's got together to stop that. And that's what we're trying to do. It is a challenge, but I do think that as long as we're united and agree a plan coming out of today, it is perfectly doable. But we've got to act swiftly when we get back.
Well, I don't want to be too cynical, but setting aside the point that the word challenge in your game usually means impossible.
No, I know why you say that to me, but I had these interviews back in March, April, when it was put to me that we would leave without a deal or we would all have to vote for Theresa May's deal. We wouldn't be able to do anything about it. In the end, we did pull together on a cross-party basis, and we did then actually pass legislation requiring the Prime Minister to extend. Now, I mean, so in that sense, it is a challenge, but it's a doable challenge, I think.
What about the fact that a lot of people who are going to be coming along today, who are broadly under the same umbrella, they don't want a no-deal Brexit, they have no intention of serving under Jeremy Corbyn as a caretaker Prime Minister. They've made that very clear. So whatever happens, even if you meet the challenge, the chances of Corbyn being the guy to actually run things, should it come to that, are nil, because they won't serve under him.
Well, I think the important thing is to accept there are a number of different ways of achieving this. One is a vote of no confidence, which could lead to a different government. The other is to, as it were, seize the order paper, to take the business of the House and to pass legislation. It was actually the second of those that we did in March, April, and therefore an option is to repeat that exercise. That doesn't actually involve a caretaker government. If, on the other hand, there's a vote of no confidence, I think the first issue is it capable of being won? And only then do you get on to the question of who should form an administration. I think that it's quite right for Jeremy Corbyn to say, if that happens, as leader of the opposition, I ought to be the person to pull this together,
but historically and traditionally. If he's not got the support, would you look at someone else like Ken Clarke or Harriet Harman? There are other names that have been suggested.
Yeah, I wouldn't get ahead of ourselves at this stage. We've had a summer of various names being put forward. Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the opposition. It's for him to make that judgment call as to whether there is a vote of no confidence. And if it is, and it wins, it's for him to try and form an administration.
But you wouldn't rule out supporting others to make it work, though?
Yeah, I think at the point of today's meeting, I think the spirit should be that nobody rules anything out. We look at all the options. A vote of no confidence is only one of them, and it's got to be a judgment call because it's got to be right. We could take other routes, and I think there'll be an appetite for looking at what those other routes are, because whatever happens, it's got to be effective, because if we don't stop the sort of chaos that will follow from a no-deal Brexit, then I don't think we're really doing our job properly.
Now, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, has said very clearly that should there be a general election, and it looks as though there probably is going to be one, probably mid-October, he would campaign for Remain.
Yes.
That seems to go against what the Labour Party may or may not be saying as a whole and what Mr Corbyn thinks as a whole. There is massive confusion. If there were an election tomorrow, we know that the Liberals would be campaigning for Remain. We know what the Tories, under its present leadership, would be campaigning for, to get out by October the 31st. What on earth would Labour stand for? Let's move beyond this meeting today. What is the Labour Party's position on Brexit?
Yeah, we've taken it in two parts. We've said that up until an election, we think any outcome now should go to a referendum. We'll campaign for Remain. And therefore, that's relatively straightforward. If there's an election, then we're absolutely committed that should be a further referendum, because I think now the only way to resolve this is to go back to the people and ask them whether they want to proceed, and that the Remain should be an option. A number of us...
What would you campaign for? What would you campaign for as a party? Would you be campaigning to Remain or to leave?
What we finally put in our manifesto, we'll have to decide nearer the time. But John McDonnell's...
So you don't know yet?
Well,
so you actually don't know?
We've got a long way down the road. We've said that we will have a referendum. Remain will be an option. John McDonnell has made it clear that he will campaign for Remain.
I'm sorry. I don't like interrupting, Mr. Tom, but I have to interrupt you here, Sir Keith. You're basically saying that you don't know whether Labour is a pro-Leave party, a pro-Brexit party, or a Remainer party. You don't know. You don't know.
Let me just answer that. We've made it absolutely clear that if there's a referendum now, we're going to campaign for Remain, so that answers that question. That we will go into an election saying there should be a referendum, that Remain should be an option. A number of us, John McDonnell, myself, would have gone on to say we'll make the case for Remain. But we do have a democratic process in the Labour Party. We have to look at the circumstances in which an election is called. But by already committing to a referendum, by already committing that Remain must be an option, we've got a long way down the road.
But if Remain is an option, then Leave is an option, isn't it? If it's just an option, then there is another option, and that's to leave.
Yeah, well, that's why I think already before the election we've committed to Remain, and a number of us, John McDonnell said what he said. I've always said that I would campaign for Remain, but we need to do this democratically as a party. We need to make sure that the whole party is comfortable with the position. And we have a process.
What would Mr Corbyn campaign for tomorrow? Election tomorrow, what would he campaign for?
I have no doubt that Jeremy Corbyn will try to bring together the policy of the Labour Party, and he will then advocate it and advance it and support it. But we've got a process we go through whenever an election is called. We need to go through that process before we finally sign off what the position is. Most parties actually go through a process like that.
You've got a split, haven't you?
No, I don't. I mean, this has been overplayed. Over the last 2 or 3 years, there are undoubtedly differences in the Labour Party, different views, of course there are. But actually, at the big-ticket items, the really big, crunchy votes, we've always pulled together. Every time there's been a vote on a deal or anything like that, or stopping no deal, people say, well, you'll split. We haven't done. And today is very much about bringing people together to make sure we have that united front going into next week. And I'm clear that we're going to achieve that.
There is a lot of confusion about Labour's position. And do you think that's what's affecting the poll results? Because when we look here, Conservatives are 12 points ahead of you. They're on 33 at the moment, Labour 21 in the latest poll that was run at the weekend. You must be really worried about Labour's performance.
Well, the polls change the whole time, as we know. Of course, any party in opposition wants to be ahead in the polls, and we'll do everything we can to try to achieve that. The immediate task in hand is, can we pull together a group of MPs and stop Boris Johnson taking us on this reckless course? Jeremy Corbyn's led on that, called this meeting today. I'm glad people are coming to that meeting, and I hope that we can therefore get that united front. That's the first step. Of course, we want to ensure that the polls change, but the first thing is, have we got our policy right going into next week? Have we got that united front capable of stopping Boris Johnson doing something which, frankly, I think would be very reckless for our country?
All right, one last question. I know what you're going to say to this, but I'll put it to you anyway. Do you... well, it's fair enough. Do you sense that the momentum has changed? That since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, since he's been making all his policy statements, and obviously since what happened at Biarritz and the reaction to him by other world leaders at Biarritz, do you sense that to some extent you guys are being left behind, that the landscape is changing under your feet?
No, I don't accept that, and particularly on Brexit. And the challenge I'd put back to you is, what has Boris Johnson said that is different to what Theresa May said? Theresa May used to say, I'm not letting Parliament get in the way. Theresa May used to say it's for Parliament to get on with it. What actually, when you look at it, when you scrape away, what difference is there to the approach he's taking and that of Theresa May? What substantively has changed? He hasn't put a different deal on the table. He hasn't come up with an alternative to the backstop. And he still thinks you can push Parliament away and don't have to listen to it. and that you say no deal is the default. That's exactly her strategy.
Sir Keir, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you on the whole for answering the questions.